In Italy, there is no citizens' income or minimum income. It's something that exists in 27 European member states, but not in ours.
The total number of people at risk of poverty or social exclusion remains very high. In 2016, 118 million European citizens, or 23.5% of the total population, were at risk of poverty, even after social transfers have taken place. It is clear we still have a long way to go before we reach the Europe 2020 target of lifting at least 20 million people out of poverty.
A year ago, we all proclaimed the European Pillar of Social Rights, which recognises that everyone lacking sufficient resources has the right to adequate minimum income benefits, ensuring a life in dignity at all stages of life, and effective access to enabling goods and services. For those who can work, minimum income benefits should be combined with incentives to integrate or reintegrate into the labour market. That's what the pillar says.
There are substantial differences between member states, but we need to guarantee and direct policies throughout the Union so that a minimum income will support people adequately.
And we are talking about a wage or a salary. We're not talking about just an income here. We believe that a minimum wage for all workers would enable people to have decent living conditions with decent work for everyone. That's our main concern.
Studies have shown that minimum income schemes are effective. Having said this, we totally support that right, and we believe that right must be implemented in an intelligent way, and this is why we must say that this is up to the countries. And what can the Commission do? Well, the Commission can act, and urgently, because it is obvious that a minimum income is just but one extra measure in order to help people become part of society.
The minimum income scheme that we've been talking about in the Parliament is about the last resort income for people so people are not left destitute. And I think we should also be aware in this that we're not talking here about unemployment benefit, because of course not everybody is in a position to be able to work.
Europe will only have a future if we don't push out millions of people away from the right track. This guaranteed income should be the backbone of our union.
Wants to introduce. We're not talking about charity or handouts here. We're talking about an instrument that will produce inclusion and participation in society, which means that people can fully exercise their fundamental rights. It's a tool which will also be able to fight corruption and organised crime, because they feed off economic uncertainty.
Who support this income is a joke and it's a trap. It distributes poverty and is paid through taxes by those who are less poor, and it supports companies. It's a safety net for liberal dismissals, high unemployment and extreme poverty. They try to stop social explosions.
We have created and consecrated a minimum income within the social pillar. This makes it possible for us to consider it to be a public European policy. We need a directive binding member states on this.
This shouldn't be something that we discuss in the European Parliament. This is something that EU member states should decide on in a sovereign manner. They have to decide what they can afford, what they want to spend, and what kind of social security, social well-being they want to see. Commissioner, you should launch a framework directive for professional social security, which combines a guarantee to work and training right throughout the life of every European citizen, as well as the right to housing and education. The financial resources of large businesses today, the cash that is in private banks, there is lots of money around, so we need to use that money to create this social.
We need to look at the unavoidable mutual dependency between cause and effect in the economy. If we intervene into contracts freely entered into by forcing some people to pay more than they originally were to pay, then some of those contracts will be broken, and then many people will be financially dependent on those who remain at work. Contracts that are too expensive will be then reflected in higher prices of goods and services. We'll be poor, all of us, and that means that production will fall ultimately because people will...
Words. Initial target would be to create jobs, decently remunerated jobs, and not just an income. How can we avoid the danger to have more cases of people taking advantage of the subsidies, especially of immigrants? Why should immigrants work when they have a minimum income that's guaranteed? And
in order to efficiently fight inequalities, poverty and social exclusion, we must take a rights-based approach. And minimum income is one of the key tools we could have at our disposal. It's also time that we had a collective discussion on the possibility of having a universal basic income. To consider income that is not linked to work is often perceived as undermining the value of work, but I believe, on the contrary, that we must change our traditional mindset so as to realistically address the existing and future revolutions affecting the labour market. And this would allow us to approach social and economic policies from the perspective that individuals are not only workers, but also rights holders and active citizens.
And I propose that every citizen of Europe, including migrants, we shall promise them a 100% of minimum wage of a minimum income. 60% is too little for life and dignity, and let's guarantee such income regardless of whether the people work or not. Let's stop assessing whether people are lazy or keen. Let's guarantee 100% of minimum wage to everyone.
But all too often when we look at these issues, people say this is up to member states. It's not up to us. However, that's not true. This is something for our European family to deal with. It's up to us, our commissioners, our politicians.
Members as well. I think we need a European directive which can build on the experience which has been gleaned in individual member states, which would smooth the way towards that. It's always bad when the Parliament votes something down just by a very slender majority of a dozen votes or so. I think we cannot have haves and have-nots in this area. Those who get protections and those who go unprotected. We have a range of different instruments which are not always effective in connection with the labour market. But a guaranteed minimum income should have a proper framework which provides for welfare. It's not simply a handout.